No problem. Okay, great. All right. Well, we'll get started. I appreciate everybody sticking around to the absolute bitter end of BSides to hear my talk. I'd like to say I'm batting cleanup, but it's probably not that. So anyway, so the talk I'm going to present today is Broke Not Broken, an effective information security program with a $0 budget. But first, a little bit about me. I mean, you can read my my corporate communications approved bio in the pamphlet. But I thought I'd share a little bit, I don't know, more direct level about me and my background and why you might even want to bother continuing to sit through the rest of my talk. You know, credit where credit is due. I completely stole this idea from Johnny Long. So. Hi, my name is, I used to be one of these, but now I'm one of these. I work for them, I do this for them. I'm wearing the jacket because they let me use the logo. Before that, I was a security consultant for this company. You probably know them, but probably by other names. But that doesn't really matter because I didn't really do anything on their behalf. I worked for them and them and them and them and them. And them, and them, and them, and them, and them. Okay, let's see, what else? I learned to code here. I learned technical writing here. I got my business degree here. I've got one of these. I've got one of these. Believe it or not, I'm old enough. I even have one of those. Yep. Let's see. And so none of this makes me anything like this guy, which I'm not, because like I said, I'm like this guy. Though when I get up for work in the morning, I like to think I'm a little more like this guy, except without the bag of guns, because it's not my job to stop this guy. It's my job to stop these guys. And if you don't believe me, here's a picture of the Gibson. Okay, so that's me. Now let's talk a little bit about you. Because if we're going to talk about why we would even put forth the concept of having a security program that doesn't have a budget, which is insanity in and of itself, I grant you, let's talk about the problem that we might need to solve in the first place. So a little bit of the hard truth. You work in Michigan. And that's not a bag on Michigan. I'm a native son. I love this state. I will probably never move away again. And this is where we've chosen to have our family and raise our kids, but there's some things wrong with Michigan. So one of them is that Michigan's been in a steady state of recession since before 9/11. It just has. And so even though we've kind of skipped off the bottom of the double dip, the last recession was really a double dip on Michigan. And things are improving, so I'm not saying don't be optimistic, but we haven't even begun to approach where this state was in terms of jobs and revenue since 1999. So things are tight. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, unless you work at GE and then, I mean, whatever. I'm not bagging on GE, but please, you guys don't have a budget problem when it comes to security. All right. This is my. You work in Michigan, and dear Kevin Bacon. Okay. Other things, right? So the other thing that's happened over the last 10 years, those of us in the Midwest have been suffering through kind of an elongated manufacturing recession, is that consumerism has completely changed the way your IT department works. And if they haven't been paying attention, your CIO now finds him or herself behind the 8 ball, right? Anybody stop by the gas station and get an updated map to find this place? Why not? Right. Exactly. So the last time I bought something, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I pushed a button that controls the relationship that I have with this company. I interacted live with someone, and then I bought something, and they sent it to my house. And that's such a huge transformative thing for everybody that wants to make money. Whether or not they understand how to play in this space, they think they need to be in this space, right? So if your CIO is not talking about what they're doing around mobile technology, what they're doing about additional web capability, what they're doing about contact management, CRM, customer engagement, whatever you want to call it, and they're not talking about how they're going to do more of it cheaper and faster with things like cloud or ASPs. Is anybody still using that term? It's all cloud now. But whatever the case might be, if you're not hearing them talk about it, that's because somebody else in the business is talking about it. And we'll talk about why you need to find that person in a few minutes. So we add all of that up and add to that the sad truth that security is not strategic. Now, you may have a security strategy. I have a security strategy. I don't dare get out of bed in the morning and show up in my office without some idea of what that is and the ability to communicate that to my upline and to their peers and down to the staff that actually carry it out, as well as all of the other folks in IS that need to know what I'm focused on and why it is I'm knocking on their door. But the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter how secure I make things for my company, it's only ever table stakes. I'm not driving innovation. I'm not moving things forward. I'm certainly not seeing patients. Believe me, you don't want me to be the next person that shows up with a scalpel to perform surgery on you. I didn't go to school for that. We already talked about that. So, so that leads to this problem, right? You may be getting budget to support the stuff we've already invested in, right? Pay your maintenance, scheduled end-of-life stuff for, that PICS has got to become an ASA, right? You can't run McAfee Virus Scan 8.5 anymore, except on the NT4 box that we all know you have still. But the ability to invest in new capabilities, whether it be consulting dollars, whether it's capital for new software or new appliances, or whether it's even just budget for new staff, they're not going to throw at you. And so let's talk about that for a minute, because the reality of the situation is that the CIO's role has become innovate or die. If you sell direct to consumer, or even if you don't, but there's some perception that you have to engage consumers, and you're not in that space, your CIO is looking at every other problem he has and saying, if I don't go do this, the company's not relevant in 3 years. And frankly, you want him working on that problem because these are the people that pay you. And if in 3 years the company's not relevant, well, then it's gone in 5 and you need a new job anyway. So who cares about your budget? So a little tough love. Also, none of the stuff the CIO is going to spend any money on is going to make anything you're doing easier. Right? This stuff all plugs into the internet. Everything we're going to spend money on is higher risk than the last round of stuff we did before from a security perspective. Additionally, I hope the second bullet's not news to you, but got PII, got financials, got manufacturing IP, got storage, got bandwidth, then there is a very organized group of criminals that would like to send you a couple of emails. Because they can monetize it. They can make money on it. This is the new black market. Foreign competitors have your old IP. They're probably going to get your new IP too. So if a big part of that mobile push is to go along with new product that you'd like to launch, and you'd really like to get it out there before the Chinese knockoffs hit the market, then you've got a lot of work to do and no budget to do it. And anybody get a call from, let's say, consultants, or maybe your representative, saying, hey, good news, the industry you're in, we're going to regulate it less. Yeah, not likely. So the bar is getting raised, or at least the obstacle course has gotten longer, depending on how you view regulation and how compliance looks in your organization. It's different everywhere. So how do we address the issue of these problems coming on at the same time that we're not getting investment? Well, the first is we're going to stop calling them problems. We're going to stop talking about challenges. I'm not even going to say opportunities because that's just one of those like optimists buzzwords, right? Like, look at this great opportunity we have, right? I mean, you're all laughing because you work with that person, right? Like somebody just delivered horrible news and they're like, what a great opportunity. That is not great. That's not an opportunity. But so instead, we're just going to talk about strategic initiatives, right? We're going to talk about the hard work that we have to do because these are transformational times. So what does that mean? Well, we're going to talk about business alignment. Okay, so business alignment is not this. Business alignment, it turns out, is actually really, really simple, right? So when you're business aligned, what you're doing is relevant to your leadership and to the company's strategy. We'll talk about strategy in a minute because that ain't simple, is it? Like that's something different on its own. So you're relevant. What you're doing is enabling that strategy, right? So you're talking about the same thing that your CIO is talking about, the CEO is talking about. You're working on making that thing a success, and you're doing forward-looking things, right? This isn't about, as I stand here today, this change control is going to introduce too much risk, we're going to violate this law, and so I can't let it through. Believe me, important work, not saying stop. But you're not business aligned when you're, the guy at the gates going, I'm gonna let that one through, I'm gonna let that one through, that one, stop. I always use this this metaphor. There's two, right? The security problem, I call it the hall monitor and the priest, right? So if I'm the hall monitor, I'm the typical security guy that I've got to run around and find out what people are doing. And when I tell you to stop because you're running in the hall, if you don't stop, what am I gonna do? Not much. Right? Stop, or I'll say stop again. Yeah, exactly, thank you. Precisely. I'll send you to the principal's office and you might get detention, right? But I'm certainly not directly giving you detention, and I'm certainly not going to be allowed to fire you, right? So let's start there. If your security function can't fire people, then don't spend a whole lot of time on rule enforcement. It's sort of a waste of your time. And then the priest is, hey, security guys, we built this thing. Check and make sure it's okay because we go live on Monday. Right. So, but we're going to talk about how we solve that problem because it's actually up to you to solve that problem because it is, right? They're strategically aligned, or at least they've got money, right, which makes them ahead of the game compared to you. No offense. So that's business alignment. Those three things, right? You're on message, you're relevant, you're working on enabling the same things that everybody else is working on, and you're looking forward. Okay, so what's our strategy? I just told you need to be focused on strategy. I would bet that maybe some of you in the room have a really good idea of what your company's strategy is, right? What your stated goal is, what your vision and values might be, what it is you're going to try and accomplish over the next 3 to 5 years. You might even know what the top 5 things that you're spending budget on this year are. But I bet there's a good number of folks in the room that don't know what their company's strategy is. So these are some questions you can ask yourself to kind of figure this out. What does the CEO say the strategy is? Let's start with that. Right? I mean, if your executive officer says, we're going to go, we're going to innovate in the space of new solar-powered flashlights that use a hybrid model so you can put gas in your flashlight too. So be it, you know which projects you should probably be talking to. They're funded, they're important, right? The solar-powered gas hybrid flashlight project, you should talk to those people. What are your other second-tier executives, the CIO, the CFO, the COO, right? Because your CIO isn't necessarily going to be out front on everything. That has everything to do with politics and dynamics in the C-suite within your organization. And I know some of the folks sitting in the room, your C-suite could be a company unto itself. So spend time finding out what people are worried about. But acknowledge that what the CEO or even what the COO says your goals for the year are as an organization, and the things that your top executives are worried about, right? Market readiness for the super duper solar powered flashlight hybrid, right? We might be worried about market readiness for that. But if we're not doing anything about market readiness, is that really our strategy? Right, if we're worried about the complexity of increased regulation, but we haven't funded any projects to address our readiness for that new regulation, is that really our strategy? No, it's just something that we're worrying about and doing nothing about it. So what are you, right, so what are you spending money on? Actually, I think these two go to that, right? I mean, the bottom 2 bullet points are where you should ask. If this stuff is in alignment, great. You work at a good company, stay there. if all of this has 0 overlap with any of that, and those bottom 2 are both going on, run. But before you run, here's some things you can do. So what's IT spending money on? And then in addition, is your company spending lots of money on technology without IT involvement? This happens from time to time in companies where some other person, and blame the cloud or whatever. Which, by the way, like, this is a unicorn. Does anybody actually run across? This is how most cloud sales gigs go. They don't sell to IT anymore because they compete with capabilities. IT is really, really good at calling BS on startups that don't know what they're doing anyway, because we've got more experience and more seasoned people in our team than they have in theirs in a lot of cases. And so when you ask things like, well, what's your RTA if the primary database goes down? And they go, 99.99% uptime. Like, no, that's right? Which is why they hate talking to us, because A, we don't even have the budget, B, we don't make the business decision, and C, we make them look stupid. So they've stopped talking to us altogether, and now they're talking to somebody in finance all about their platform. And what are they telling them at the end of the meeting? Oh, and by the way, well, yeah, we're going to save you money. This is going to be easy to implement. And by the way, you'll be up and running in 2 weeks, and you won't even have to call your help desk once. We are your new IT department. Asterisk. And what is that asterisk? That asterisk is, so long as you manually type in every piece of data that's in your current source of truth for, say, contact management, and then maintain it by hand, right? In which case, then it becomes an unbudgeted burden that falls to the IT department, and we all know what the quality of those are when they come across the finish line. So even though you might not be invited to the table, these are good places to go looking for opportunities to get business aligned. Okay, so risk assessment. So risk assessment is great because it's really a matter of doing some homework, coming up with a methodology. There are tons of good free ones. I recommend steal liberally from the internet. But really, it's this simple. Risk equals impact times likelihood. Most enterprise risk assessments, and most of the ones you'll get out of like Big 4 audit companies, are really, really simple, like 5-point Likert scales. This is not hard math. This is easy math. So this is you and an Excel spreadsheet and a bunch of questions and some meetings doing risk assessment and risk management. Well, risk assessment. Risk management requires budget. We'll get to that. So internet exposed systems, we've got a lot of those. Core applications, you probably got a couple of those. If nobody's looking at those, there's something to be said for understanding what your risks are there. Those are all things that your CIO will care about, by the way. Fraud and separation of duties, these are all things that your CFO will care about. So if there's opportunities for people to steal from the company electronically through your ERP or whatever it might be, get involved in that, right? Good opportunity for you to help add value pretty much just out of your own time. Business continuity planning and DR, yuck, but somebody, but lots of people care, right? I mean, you want to know how much your company cares about BCP? Like, hang out when something crashed, right? Like, just hang around your help desk when like something's down, and how much do they care about BCP and DR? You'd be surprised how little people are willing to throw at this in terms of money. And actually, you don't need a ton of money to be really good at this. You need money to be good at high availability. But high availability is what people do when they don't want to do the planning and documentation and maintain it for business continuity. Also, business continuity, right? And I don't want to, this isn't turning into a BCP talk, like the end of this sentence, I'm done. But the other part of business continuity, right, is really identifying who are the users of this thing and actually sitting in security, especially if you're responsible for, let's say, access and administration and role-based authorization within your organization. You know better than anyone else where you work, who needs to be available to make a thing run. It's in your log file. Anybody in healthcare or work with people in healthcare? Right. So the phrase of the year for healthcare is risk assessment. Right. KPMG came out and said everybody we audited last year on those on the OCR funded HIPAA audits, nobody was doing a good job of doing the risk assessment. And I know why. I'm in healthcare. I've been in healthcare for the last going on 9 years. And the reason that nobody's doing it is because the way it's written in the law, the actual HIPAA security rule that went into effect in 2004, is it's garbage. It's 3 sentences, right? It says you must perform a risk assessment as part of your security program. Well, when you read that in 2004, you did it once and thought you were done, and that's a valid interpretation of that law until now when they say, oh, no, what we really meant is you got to do it annually. It has to cover the following scope, and you must have a remediation plan that you can demonstrate you made progress against. All of that wording, not anywhere in the law. But also, if you're on the delivery side, whether it's whether you're you support doctors or you're in a hospital, meaningful use. If you're not aware of meaningful use, there's a whole bunch of federal matching dollars for patient engagement. This is the we think HIEs might not have been the answer 3 years ago play around we need to get doctors and patients communicating online, right? We need to drive down, people, really honestly what this is, the stage 2 stuff, in my humble opinion, is we gotta stop paying doctors for meeting people in their office to give them lab results that they could just send them electronically, right? But there's more to it than that. There's also disease management and other things that could really make a big difference. But anyway, there's lots of money in this. This requires a risk assessment. So do you think if you did a risk assessment against your main EMRs or your claims pay application, and then any of the brand new web and mobile stuff that you're spinning up to engage with those patients around meaningful use, you think there might be money next year to fix those holes? Sure, because if you don't, you're not going to get the money from the federal government, which could be a lot. So just that's my tip to those of you in healthcare. Oh, and vendors. Let's pick on vendors. No, seriously though, because because you probably have some strategic vendors that are holding a lot of risk for your organization, right? And this is a really good way to kind of get aligned up front. So shortcuts to this, go talk to procurement. Procurement cares a lot about this. Understand what their concerns are, focus on what they're interested in up front, and offer to do a bunch of their work for them. And then add into that your own technology risk assessments, privacy risk assessments, and operational risk assessments, and be able to score vendors when they come out of the process. You may not ever get the ability to veto a vendor, but if you can kick up to the signing executive or director who's going to be looking at that vendor, what the risk is of going with that vendor, at the very least, before, right, because the other thing I found is vendors are really, really pliable before you cut a check. Right? They will bend over. Sure, dedicated hosting, encrypting, yeah, of course. No, we don't do SAML for single sign-on right now, but we could develop that in the next 60 days, and we give it to you at no cost. Call them after the first check clears and they've got you for 3 years on a contract. Yeah, we don't support SAML. It's not even on the roadmap. Thanks for calling. Goodbye. So this is right. So this is an opportunity just by having the conversation with the vendor, right? Because at that point, you're not asking anybody on the project team to do any of the hard work. They can punt it back over the fence to the vendor, and you can stand in their project meetings and go, oh yeah, well it's really bad, and it's pretty industry standard. They really ought to just have this. And so somebody will go, yeah, we want you to write this into the contract that you're going to do it. And what have you done? You've spent $0, a little bit of your time. You haven't even added to the budget of the project, and you have not only made your environment secure, but you've also made the environment of every other customer that that company does business with more secure, you're doing charity work. Congratulations to you. So pick on vendors a lot. So I just mentioned project consulting. So this is just one slide in my whole presentation, but if you get nothing else out of today, get this. This is where information security inside of a company, so defensive sec, risk management, compliance, whatever you call what it is you do, if you work at the company where your security is applied, this is the best. This is where you are forward-looking, this is where you cost the least, and this is where people like working with you. Which, admittedly, right, some of you somewhere in this room, there are people that don't like you. Not because you're a jerk, right, but because you are there to check their work, and they don't, and that's weight and cost and things that they don't like. So go to where the money's being spent. Go to the projects, right? You might not have gotten new capital this year to do new cool stuff, but somebody did. Go work with them. Give liberally of your time, and focus on their outcomes and their objectives, right? So here's a scenario for you. And actually, this is my how I know I'm business aligned. There's this project going at my company right now, and it is going live in August. And we got in early with the project team, and they asked us to kind of look at the contract. And we discovered, you know, hey, what we're not seeing here is a pass-through on the hosting fee. Where's this hosted? Guesses? Well, yeah, a dirty, dirty cloud called GoDaddy. Oh yeah, yep, yeah, and this is not one of those like, oh, it's just, you know, marketing collateral in the web. No, this is strategic. Every place I've been to 5 different events since the beginning of the year where the CEO of our company has been. This is 20,000. I work at a pretty big healthcare provider on the west coast of the state. Last 5 times I've seen the CEO, he's brought up this project with the site that's hosted at GoDaddy, with no ability to do single sign-on from our own web app, no ability to encrypt data in the database. And when we asked to review their policies and procedures, they sent us 200 pages, which seemed like a lot of policies and procedures for an 8-person startup with a standard work-from-home setup. Why they would have an enterprise wireless policy, we were a little surprised at, until we found where their search and replace had failed, and we found the actual company that they stole the policy documents from.
But look, Annika Patrick.
Question?
Well, what's the problem? It's just floating around up there. I mean, because that's the way they think, though. That's, you know.
True story, and I won't name the person, but I was in an actual meeting where we were talking about. So those of you that deal with the federal government know there's all kinds of regulation around geographically where you can put data that they have an interest in, right? And typically the rule is you can't put it outside the U.S. So we were working with a company whose name I promise you know, that has a cloud presence. They have U.S.-based data centers, but they have some in Canada and some in APAC and some in Europe. And we said we want to specify in the contract that you will never fail over outside of the country, that we're only ever going to have a presence in one of these 4 locations. They didn't, but we got there. But what was really funny was the executive sponsor said, so that's really an issue? I mean, I thought, you know, when it said cloud, like, you know, geographic boundaries didn't really matter. I just kind of thought it was up there somewhere. And I kid you not, I realized at the moment I'm sitting across the table from somebody with a much bigger paycheck than me and a master's degree who thought the cloud was actually airborne. Yep. And why did she think it was airborne? She thought it was airborne because no vendor ever came along to dispel that myth, right? They were happy to let her keep believing that it was magic. Okay, so, but again, right, project consulting, you're in early in the phase of the, you know, if you're there for project ideation or for design, you have the opportunity to comment on things before anybody's written a line of code, before anybody's bought hardware, before anybody's chosen a vendor. And so you have the opportunity to work in tandem with these people on shared goals to drive towards secure decisions. and you have visibility to the budget constraints, so you're not the jerk that showed up and blew their budget at the last minute because you knew what it was before they ever spent any of it, right? And you were also there at the time when you had the opportunity to say, well, you know what, it really would make a big difference. And now the project manager and everybody else is on board with you. Really would make a big difference if we did this other thing and we could get more of what we wanted, but it would require a little bit more money. And then as a project, you go back and ask for some additional money, which is a whole lot more successful than being the guy at the end going, hey, you're going to need to spend all this other money and delay your go live by 30 days because that's more secure. Nobody listens to that guy. That guy's a jerk. He's in the way. He's an obstacle. But if you're in the early project meetings, the same discussions like, wow, it's been so great to have security at the table with us. They've made this so easy for us. So I'll stop ranting. Architecture or whatever, you know, I don't mean to pick on folks that have architect in their title or work in an enterprise, you know, whether you do Zachman or TOGAF or whatever. I don't put it on LinkedIn, but I'm EACOE certified in Zachman, and you know, but architecture really is an opportunity though. To kind of have your say on stuff, right? I mean, it's a little ivory tower. It can be a little obnoxious, but you know, right? But everybody expects the architect to show up and talk about, you know, cloud, mobile, BYOD, SOA, big data, right? I mean, you know, just read the last 6 months headlines off of. Right, off of Networking World or whatever, right? But the thing is that if you're doing, you know, or CIO Magazine or whatever, right? But somebody in your organization is reading that and thinking about it, and at least saying, your CIO is saying, I have to have an answer for this buzzword because my upline is going to go to a conference somewhere, and they're going to want to come ask me what are we doing about big data? Backing it up, sir. Right. It's in the cloud. We're backing it up to the cloud. Right. So, but one of the things you can do as an architect, though, is you can get there before everybody else's project is even funded. You can get to where you think you're going. But again, this requires kind of understanding what the strategy is. But then you can come out with, so instead of being the security group that shows up and says like, oh, you did this all wrong, go back and rework it. You instead say, hey, I don't know if anybody's going to do a project on big data, but here's some security stuff that would let you do big data around our sensitive data, right? Or here is how we would want to secure and make redundant RESTful services to support portable web applications, HTML5 apps, and mobile apps that we want to roll out. And here is maybe, you know, here are some standards we would want for, you know, secure storage containers so that we can put the data that our customers actually care about right on their mobile device instead of having to mask it and pretend like it's not there, or just leave it unsecured on their device and put them at risk and eventually us. But if you're out there describing how to do it the way you would want it done up front, then nobody's got to come ask you. And what your CIO could read into that, hopefully does read into that, is, hey, here's how we will do this securely. Additionally, the beautiful thing about architecture is it lets you say things like, the tipping point for secure mobile-enabled unstructured data in the cloud is 18 to 30 months out because the leading innovators of integration with DLP and MDA, it's still immature. I've been in this industry for 14 years. I don't know what I just said. I have no idea what that means. But the beautiful part is, but I do know what it does mean. It does mean all of those buzzwords I just threw at you, we're not ready to do that with secure data, but we will be, but we're not now. And you don't even have to stand on that point because you just said, hey, the technology is immature, right? Prove me wrong. I dare you. Like, it's fully mature, so says the vendor. Okay. So anyway, so that's like an artful ivory tower kind of way of saying no. So okay, seriously, this time on architecture though, future forward capabilities, right? So somebody somewhere in your company is thinking about how are we doing infrastructure as a service, right? if you're running out of floor space in your data center, you probably, well, you may have a CIO who's thinking, I'm never building another data center, right? Why would I, right? Somebody's CIO is thinking that, I know that. But if you never build another data center, where are you going to put your regulated data? Wouldn't you like more regulated data, right? I mean, you'd like less regulation, but you'd like more of the data because it means you're doing more of the things that are core to what it is your industry is all about. So data and network security designs for infrastructure as a service. I'll give you an example too, right? So anybody here, raise your hand, and I won't call on you or pick on you, so this is just an informal poll. You can lie and I won't check you. But raise your hand if somebody in here is doing infrastructure as a service. In particular, you're doing Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. Anybody like rolling out servers? Okay, so not nobody. So somebody to do VPC, one of your firewall engineers, probably set up some sort of a dedicated VPN tunnel and extended your network topology into the cloud. That's pretty sweet, right? Is that same guy managing the firewall rules out in front of those servers for when people hit them from the cloud? No, the answer to that is totally no. It's some server engineer that's never played with AWS before and probably didn't do it right, did he? But you don't even know because he didn't give you the VIPs, so you don't even know what to scan with your vulnerability scanner to know whether or not he got the firewall rule set right. So write him a document and show him how to do it. And moreover, go operational, right? Don't just talk about what should be done, but talk about who should own the process, right? That's another thing architecture can do, at least within IT, is say, who should own this process? Because you have existing affinity, right? I mean, that's part of how we do architecture, right? We map to business process and ours. Okay, other things, secure standards. If you want the developers to never ask you to lunch again, SDLC practices. But the one caveat to that is, okay, so today we're a Java shop, and the VP of application development has just announced that we're going to go completely .NET because they haven't read the CIO article on mobile, so we're going .NET. And so before everybody's got to get Visual Studio Ultimate installed at 13K a pop, we're going to go ahead and write SDLC for .NET. So while everybody's learning the new standard and working in the environment, you do have an opportunity to introduce standards. But if you've been coding Java in your environment for 7 years and you show up with, by the way, here's how you do it right, that was, I hope you enjoyed writing the document because that's the value that it's going to provide, your personal enjoyment. Server build guides. Here's how to sell server build guides to infrastructure, by the way, because they hate these. And I would too, right? If somebody that didn't work in my department, wasn't responsible for my responsibilities, came to me and said, by the way, here's how you're going to do your job now, I wouldn't care for that. Here's the take I have on server build guides, though. Go back to the last time you had an IT audit that said, boy, you guys, like, you're not patching this right, this isn't done right, you should, right? And all this stuff, because I promise you, this has happened, right? Big Four auditor comes in and, well, what we found is that all of your Oracle is running on port 18281, and that's the default port, and that's a problem. And that's got to drive your DBAs nuts, right? They're like, well, okay, yeah, it's on that port, and it's on like 5 other ports because that's how we deploy TNS. And like, and by the way, why is that even a problem? Well, it's a best practice, which is, by the way, if you have a CPA who's under the age of 30 saying it's best practice, that means they don't know. Right. Back to Miller's Law from Jen's talk. Okay, anyway, but the advantage is, here's our server build guide. If you go with the golden image, live on the standard, then when the auditors come through, they have to audit against our standards and not theirs, and you can stop listening to them say stupid things, and you can stop dealing with onesie, twosie break fix things that you shouldn't have to be dealing with because we're going to publish these standards. It's your one way out with server guides, but they could see that as a lot of value. Or they might not. They might, I don't know. Okay, metrics. Security metrics are super hard. Risk metrics are the easiest to put together because they come with a number, and you can add them up, and they kind of make sense. And nobody can call you on your risk metrics, right? Because if you don't have risk metrics today, and you're going to build them, memorize this phrase: my risk metrics are relative to themselves and themselves alone. They do not translate across environments. Right, that's because what that really means is all I'm doing is telling you this one's worse than that one based on hopefully something that's a little more objective than it is subjective. But that's all you're really saying. Good metrics should tell a story. And ultimately, right, where you're headed is data-driving decision making. This slide describes the next 12 months of my security program where I work. And I've got a lot of collateral. Actually, if you care, because you're going to go down this road yourself, I'm happy to afterwards show you my collateral for this. I put together an infographic and a bunch of slides, and I am selling my data-driven security strategy within the organization, and I'm happy to share because, frankly, I think it makes sense. But the reality of the situation is if you don't have metrics, then you don't have a story to tell because you can't quantify it. And even if you can tell a story, you can only sell that story once because somebody's going to want a result. And if you can't produce a measurable result over time, then it's hard to continue to invest in your organization, right? Those of you that read Richard Baitlick's books or blogs are probably familiar with his statements that security ROI is this unprovable thing. And it's really right, especially when we talk defensive, internal to a company. Well, we implemented full disk encryption. It cost us $1.5 million to do the entire organization. And I stand on, if it prevented us from having to go to the news once because we lost a laptop full of patient information, then A, it was worth it because it was the right thing to do, and B, it paid for itself just on one lost laptop. But we didn't have to go to the news. We didn't spend that money, and because we encrypted it, we don't bother, because we shouldn't, don't bother to track what data was on it. And it's an unprovable. I can say, well, we lost 4 laptops last year. Yeah, but did any of them have the entirety of our database on it that we would have had to report to the press? I don't know, because I don't want to have to track that. Well then, right, then you're sort of, and that's an easy one. That's an easy one that I would hope most people would get. So metrics, lots of metrics. And be dispassionate, right? You can tell kind of by listening to me, I get fired up about this stuff. Sometimes it even makes me angry. But be outside of that, be away from that. And sometimes that's going to mean having to stop gaming your numbers and really do the things that your numbers say you have to focus on, even if your gut tells you something different. That's going to be the hardest challenge you'll have in operating metrics over years. But you'll be surprised. But the other thing about metrics too is don't forget the internal facing value of them. Now the value of them for the purpose of this talk is to give you a case to go forward with on where investment belongs. Or at the very least, to get to a place where you've done a really good job of informing your upline and the decision makers in your company about the risk that they're accepting, about the problems that they have, how good you're doing, how good you're not doing. Are things improving? Are they getting worse? And that's everything, right? Even with hard to quantify things like external threats. At the very least, you need to have some level of metrics around your incident response. If you don't have an incident response practice, stick around. I have some more on that. Because you'd be surprised how cheaply you can do incident response. And then finally, deliverables, right? I was starting to get here with metrics. Like, you need to be churning out reports, slide decks, prezzies, infographics, whatever it is. You need to be sharing this information both in person, so people have an opportunity to pull additional information out of you, get context around it, establish a dialogue, share their concerns, give you feedback. Additionally, you also need to publish this stuff. You need to send it with them, right? So after your upline and your peers that you're talking about their stuff have had the opportunity to give you feedback, by the way, don't invite. So if you're a peer with the director of IT infrastructure and you talk a lot about his stuff, share your stuff with him first, get his feedback, and then bring in the executives, because nobody likes a blind side. But publish and present, arm them, right? Give them this information. Because if you're the only person that knows about all the stuff that you've quantified and identified through your program, then it's not going to do you much good. So build a case around it. And be transparent. And for that matter, at the very least, if nothing else, you've had several presentations, you've handed out a bunch of reports, and nobody in your upline or your peer group is going, I don't even know what security's done this year. So, and I get it. You may be sitting here saying this. None of what you said helps. That may well be true. So, real quick, we're going to play a game. And this game is called Name That Threat. Okay, so can anybody name this threat? This is a trick question. This is kind of hard, but anybody name this threat? Russian cybercrime. Wow, that's actually not bad. I made this intentionally fuzzy, but yes, this is a guy in the Ukraine getting arrested in relation to a Zeus botnet. I don't know his name. It wasn't in the article. It's probably not pronounceable, and it doesn't matter because he's dead anyway. All right, name this threat. What's that? Sabu. Yep, yeah, who said Sabu? Well done. Yep, Hector Montiger, Sabu. This guy, it's not his mugshot, so you're going to have to think hard. This will also tell me how many of you have been going to DEF CON for, yeah, Gonzalez, right? Yep, that's Albie. Okay, this guy. No, he's not from the UK. Not totally. You know, you're headed in the right direction, sort of. So his name is Matt Flannery, and for everybody that knew Sabu, you should know this guy because Australia. Yep. Yeah. So Sabu's rolling over is what led to this guy's arrest. This is Ashok. Supposedly the leader of LulzSec. How about this guy? He's my favorite of the list so far. Nobody? All right, this is David Kernell. He's famous for having hacked Sarah Palin's Yahoo account during the during the 2008 campaign. That's why you've all forgotten about him, because she didn't win. So he's still alive. And then finally. Who's that? Who said APT1? That is in fact APT1. That is PLA Unit 61398, aka APT1. Right. So I get it. All the stuff I just talked about, none of it helps with this crowd. So what can we do? Incident response. The good news about incident response is that your budget doesn't matter. The bad news about incident response is that your budget doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you're spending on prevention. The fact of the matter is you have problems. Somebody's circumventing something somewhere. No, I'm not. I'm not going to pick on them. But if you're not looking for phishing, WebKits, malware, C2 beacons, you're definitely missing something important. And chances are you're probably missing your data going out the door along with it. So the big thing that you do need investment for is dedicated time for investigating. But some time greater than 0 is better than 0. Even if it's 8 hours a week across the entirety of your team, if you're looking for something, you might find something you might add value. And beginning to do this and quantifying it and reporting on it is how you get more investment in doing this. True story. A few years ago, we put forth a budget to go ahead and start bringing in some additional capabilities, some of which I'm going to talk about. We spent money on it. I don't regret having spent money on it, but that went to the Capital Committee, a group of executives, and one of the executives said, we're just a small company in Michigan. We're not that small, by the way. We're just a small company in Michigan. Who would want to hack us? And that question, because I hadn't armed the CIO with the answer to it, cost me 2/3 of my budget that year. It just happened, right? And you know what? It's fair because none of them could answer the question. They sat around and said, well, we're going to spend all this money on defending ourselves from a threat we can't quantify. So guess what I have a lot of metrics on now. So what to collect? If you're spinning up your program, you need to be looking at web browsing across your environment. If you can put this on clients, do it because they all leave at the end of the day. But if you can't get what you can get, SMTP and logs, you know what email is coming and going from your organization. Firewall logs, this is good for finding malware. C2 beacons are getting harder and harder to find. Your IDS is worse and worse at this. But still get an IDS, and in particular get an IDS that you can write custom signatures for, because the immediate value that you will get out of incident response is I detected this problem, and now I've automated detecting it the next time it occurs, right? Because if all the threats all look the same all the time, then IPS and AV would have worked, and you wouldn't sit through these slides. You go, this guy's crazy, but I'm not, because they don't. Okay, and then full packet capture, boy, if you can get this, there's a lot of value to this. So commercial yet free. There's a lot of free technology out there. You might not realize this, but I would say that in the space of incident response, better than half of the really good stuff is available in some form for free. Log aggregation, collection, and search is going to be a key piece of what you need to be able to do. So Logger has a software appliance that's free. Splunk has a free license. Q1 Labs, QRadar has a free license. They all limit you by storage, but if you're starting out small, this is a good way to proof out the tools in your environment too, by the way. So if you say, hey, right now, today, I'm only able to look at phishing attacks because I'm only able to look at SMTP and these other things and maybe IPS, but wouldn't it be great if we could also catch drive-by downloads, but we're out of storage, but this is the tool? I mean, that's a no-brainer for your CIO. You've already proofed it in his environment, and it didn't cost him anything. NetWitness Investigator, that's a fun front end, but you got to go get your own PCAPs. But it turns out getting your own PCAPs isn't that hard. Snort, Suricata, long before my company acquired its network forensic technology, which may or may not be on that slide somewhere, we wrote our own with a bunch of Perl scripts and Snort with 0 signatures on it. And then wrote, and it was actually a project put together by a really, really smart guy named Anthony Spina. But don't do it now. Use Suricata now. But before Suricata came out, we went through all the trouble of doing that ourselves. And the ability to extract full file instead of packet snippets out of your IPS is massive. And it's really not that hard. It's not that complicated. The infrastructure is pretty simple, right? Also for log aggregation, Snare, syslog-ng. I love syslog-ng. My backup box for my ArcSight logger appliances is syslog-ng. I don't have 2 loggers. I have logger and a syslog-ng. OSSec, OSSec is free. Also, if you're interested in this, start here. Cut to the head of the line. Security Onion. So I'm just going to say 2 things about Security Onion. One, you need a pair of old boxes and a span port to get started. This is really, really straightforward. You're just going to do some reading. Additionally, Doug Burks, the guy who's behind this, in fact, he's actually presenting at a different BSides in Georgia today on this very topic. But he's got a set of talks. His talk from DerbyCon last fall is online on YouTube. Just Doug Burke's Security Onion in the YouTube search box. Go watch that presentation, and it's enough to get you started. And what it is it's all the good open source tools for network IR and analysis on a single distro ready to run. And it's even got the ability to deploy disparately across your network and send it back to a single management system for analysis. Very, very slick. Okay, the other best free thing right now, Microsoft has released EMET. Raise your hand if this is news to you. Okay, this would be the other slide in my deck you need to write down. So EMET is the Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit. I think the M was supposed to stand for malware somewhere along the way, but anyway. So version 4.0 was supposed to come out on the 28th of May. It didn't make it, but it should be out any day now. But what this does is it takes a bunch of stuff, some of the best of the Blue Hat Prize from last year in ROP prevention, as well as the ability to do complicated, essentially memory corruption, vulnerability mitigation at the kernel level. And you don't have an AV vendor who can deliver this to you today because Microsoft will only allow their signed code to do some of the things that EMET does. But don't worry, the price is right. It's free. You can, starting in version 3, you can manage with AD policy, by process memory exploit protections. That's the other thing is you can turn it on with group policy for stuff. So let's say you've got a legacy app that dies when you do anything interesting with the stack. That's okay, because you can just choose to wrap IE, Flash, and Acrobat Reader and move on. Also, the new version coming out has some stuff for certificate pinning, the ability to detect and prevent those attacks. And the biggie is right now, version 3 only writes to local syslog. So if you don't have some way of event log, so if you don't have some way of using WMI to pull event log off of every workstation in your environment, 4 will be a big boon to you, because now it'll do central reporting back to SCOM as well as back to Microsoft if you'd like to give them intel about your environment and the type of exploits that are being seen. And this is my EMET story. Part of our company is a health plan, about 1,500 workstations. We rolled it out in October of last year, and you can see these are cases by month of malware that they detected within the health plan environment. And this drop was tremendous. And actually, here's the best part. So in November, we had 1 case, and in December, we had 4. November, that 1 case was actually one of the laptops that did not, this wasn't deployed to. It wasn't part of the standard image. It was something else. And then the other 4 were fake AV that didn't use an exploit and were easily cleaned, those 4 cases in December. Question? What's that? Similar. It's, it's similar. I'll say similar. It's a little more complicated on the, but I'm not back up in the double digits, which is cool. So that's the biggest statistical decline we've had in that case metric since 2009. I told you I had a bunch of metrics about this stuff now. And this is the single largest decline we've had in malware cases across our environment. In a month-to-month comparison since we implemented special content filtering for detecting malware-related sites, right? So like your WebSense type stuff. And of course, the difference is that WebSense doesn't go home with people on my network. This goes home with you. Okay. So real quick, I just want to because I'm out here representing the West Coast. Wanted to give a couple of shameless promotions. First of all, if you're interested in working in information security, and in particular in risk management and project consulting, which I've just spent a bunch of time talking about, I'm hiring, looking for 2 people to join my team based out of Grand Rapids. If you're going to be in Grand Rapids, come visit us at GRSec. It's a monthly meetup. We go to a bar and talk about security. It's awesome. And also in the fall, even if you're not willing to come out just to drink beer with us, come out for GERCON, which I'd see Chris has already been here ahead of me and put flyers up everywhere. So that's a little redundant. Okay, and that's my talk. Who's got the first question? We're at time? All right. Then catch me in the hallway. Thank you very much.